I want to show you how we got told. Where did they get this information that allowed them to tell us that the fuel control switch transitioned to cutoff? In 2024, a United Airlines flight into Singapore had an uncommanded engine shutdown, where a uncontained engine failure resulted in the N1 and N2 values decelerating, followed by a commanded fuel switch cutoff. So what that looked like here, these are 30-second increments between the big grey lines. We can see the N1 and N2 values decelerated, the fuel flow stopped here, and then about 30 seconds later they turned off the fuel switch. Before they turned off the fuel switch, the engine computers were turning on and off. You can see off is at the bottom, on is at the top. It was turning off and on, trying to keep this from decelerating, but it couldn't stop it. There was something wrong with the engine for that one. Now, focus closely on the labels for this data line for the fuel cutoff switch. Cutoff and not cutoff. It doesn't say cut off and run. Why? Because the switch is a 4-pole dual throw switch which sends 28 volts of electrical power to ground for either the purpose of a cutoff signal or a run signal. If the cutoff signal stops, the light in an LED optocoupler or photocoupler turns off and this moves to not cut off. If the run signal turns on, it changes from not run, no light, to a light. So whilst the aircraft is in run mode, there should be a not cut off signal and a run signal, and the two together go hand in hand. In this report, all they needed to show was the cut off signal, because they want to show the fact that it did cut off. Undeniable. That they cut off the switch for this incident 30 seconds after the incident. 30 seconds after. More than 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, nearly 40 seconds after the problem. It took them 40 seconds to actually turn the fuel off. Now, it didn't take that long for the fire switch, for the fire detection to be announced, but it took them a while to get the fuel off and then pull the fire switch. You have to pull the cutoff before you can do the fire switch. It took them nearly a minute. Now, my point here is that red line is only indicating one of the two contacts within the fuel switch, the left fuel switch. It's looking at just the cut-off signal, not the run signal. There would be another data line. In the case of AI-171, I know for a fact that the switch didn't move because the ram air turbine wouldn't be out for another 8 to 15 seconds. So where did they get this talk of fuel switch cutoff? This is what happened. This is me drawing out what it would have looked like to them. Above is the run and not run signal. Below is the cutoff and not cutoff. This is equivalent to what we saw above here. Cutoff versus not cutoff. In this incident, the cutoff not cutoff didn't change. It was always at not cutoff. There was no light saying that it moved to cutoff. Never. There was no light. It didn't exist because the switch wasn't moved. So where did they get it from? Well, the run signal through the optocoupler or photocoupler, whichever terminology you may, it's basically an LED, a light-emitting diode, which accepts power only one direction for that LED to turn on. In this case, the LED turned off because the power stopped flowing through it, because everything short-circuited. So the power to the switch turns off, and the run signal through the run detector, without the switch moving, turns off. And the not run continues because the remote data concentrator is still agreeing that it hasn't seen a cutoff signal. So it's just agreeing that it still continues to see not cutoff. They don't report on that. They see the top line. And they make it either an inference, or they are told to make an inference, or they conspire. One of those three. It's either incompetence, conspiracy, or external pressure, or people trying to tell them how to interpret this. They've seen the not run signal and called that a valid fuel switch movement. That is a result of the power to the switch turning off. When we get our hands on the data, provided they have not manipulated it, we will see the cutoff signal never gets triggered and the run signal turns off. That's because it lost power through the run switch. Then, when it managed to shake off the short circuit battery after the 15-second countdown for main battery relay open, power was able to resume, and then they've taken that as a valid switch return. No pilot in their right mind waits 8, 10 to 14 seconds to turn the fuel back on. It doesn't happen. That's not how it works. Let's wait and see if we die and then turn the fuel on. That's not how it works. Some people are trying to tell me that he came back to his senses and decided to survive, or that the first officer managed to overpower him. Why didn't he turn it back off again? No, it's impossible. And it's also impossible for the ram air turbine to come out the second it did from a fuel switch cutoff, because that's not how it works. And I've proven that time and time again. And anyone who tells me that I haven't proven it hasn't watched any of my videos.